Shirley Temple's name is usually tied to a pair of sparkling eyes, a halo of curls, and a sweet smile that made America fall in love with her during the 1930s. What most people don't realize, however, is how disturbingly adult some of her earliest roles were and how much trauma she endured before she reached kindergarten. Even fewer know about the shocking accusations that followed her through her teenage years, and the bizarre rumor involving a would-be attacker who believed Shirley had entrapped a lost soul. Behind the happy tap dances and glittering dresses lurked a darker world of manipulative producers, punishing directors, and a system that happily cast a toddler in roles no child should ever play. This is the untold story of Shirley Temple's lost childhood, the dangers she faced, and how she overcame it all. In the early 1930s, the idea of child-friendly entertainment barely existed. Hollywood's infamous pre-code era lacked the regulations that would later bar explicit themes from film. Directors, desperate to push boundaries, often cast little kids in adult scenarios to shock audiences. It was a time when producers thought nothing of showing racy content or tapping into scandalous storylines because they could get away with it. Standing at the center of this was Shirley Temple, barely 3 years old, with an uncanny ability to charm a camera. Studio executives were enthralled by her cherubic face, charismatic grin, and willingness to follow directions. Many believed they'd found a gold mine, someone whose innocent persona could be juxtaposed against startlingly grown-up situations to capture attention and money at the box office. The concept of protecting child actors was virtually non-existent. Instead, the folks running the show saw children as an untapped resource, perfect for low budgets and high novelty. It didn't help that Shirley was a naturally gifted dancer, singer, and actress. Every time she performed, audiences went wild. Almost immediately, producers and directors conspired to create short films where she and other small children would reenact adult plots, from romances to war dramas. For Shirley, these storylines sometimes involved playing shockingly inappropriate characters, a fact that would haunt her in adulthood. But that was only the start of a much more alarming environment.
Not until I get back. Stay away from that cloud,
A 3-year-old as a street worker. It's practically unthinkable today. A toddler wearing suggestive outfits, blowing kisses, and implying she's exchanging affection for cash or candy. Yet that's exactly the kind of role Shirley Temple was cast in, scripts that saw her portraying a lady of the night or an entertainer in grown-up nightclubs. These short films were marketed as cute parodies, but in retrospect, they were profoundly disturbing. Titles like Politics in Washington or War Babies found Shirley dressed in revealing costumes, winking and pouting as if she were wooing men. Scenes showed her accepting candy or lollipops as payments, doing flirty dances with other children playing drunken soldiers or jaded adults. On top of that, adult male actors would sometimes watch these children from the sidelines, filming or directing them to behave in ways that made them seem far beyond their years. The people involved claimed it was all innocent fun, a comedic spin on real-life scenarios. For Shirley, though, it was deeply confusing. Not even out of preschool, she followed whatever directions the grown-ups gave her. If they said to blow kisses at the senator or customer, she did it. If they asked her to pretend to be intoxicated or worse, to mimic the behavior of a woman selling her company, she had no context for why it might be wrong. Hollywood executives saw it purely as entertainment gold. They billed her as an adorable darling with a sly, grown-up side. And it worked, because at the time, audience members by the millions would flock to see a curly-haired child star being naughty on screen. The scripts alone were unsettling, but the reality behind the cameras was far more traumatic. The punishment box. While the adult themes on screen were alarming, the stories from behind the scenes were even more nightmarish. Shirley Temple wasn't just a star in training, she was also a little girl who sometimes made mistakes or got fussy. For certain directors, any slip-up by the child actors resulted in an extreme form of discipline. One method mentioned in various accounts was locking a child inside a cramped wooden crate called the punishment box. Inside that black box was a block of ice that made the air freezing cold. The threat hung constantly over the kids: forget your lines, miss your mark, or simply cry, and you'd spend time in the box. Shirley allegedly experienced this horrific treatment, complaining afterward about how cold and dark it was, only to be told to keep quiet. If she mentioned it to her mother, there was little sympathy. Gertrude Temple was on set most days as Shirley's hairdresser, carefully crafting those signature ringlets. Yet she seemed unwilling to jeopardize her daughter's career by confronting the directors. The child star found herself caught between a mother determined to keep her on top and a father whose role was so minimal he was barely a presence. To make it worse, Shirley's recollections of these abuses were often dismissed as exaggerations. Nobody wanted to believe America's little darling was being mistreated. The studio wanted her smiling on camera, the public wanted the next big number from the curly-haired sensation, and her parents wanted the paycheck and fame that came with it. Shirley had no real advocate, so she learned to endure. And while the behind-the-scenes cruelty was heartbreaking, the betrayal that followed was even more devastating. Money lost and broken trust. Child stars often make headlines for massive paychecks, and Shirley Temple was no exception. At the height of her career, she was earning a fortune by 1930s standards, enough to set her up for life. Yet by the time she turned 22, most of it was gone. Her father, George Temple, had been entrusted to manage the finances. Instead, he allegedly made poor investments, mishandled funds, and spent lavishly. Astonishingly, reports say that out of the millions she had earned, only about $44,000 remained in her trust when she reached adulthood. For a young woman who had essentially worked nonstop since age 3, this revelation was both humiliating and crushing. She realized she'd been propped up as the primary breadwinner, only to discover that her parents, most notably her father, had neglected her financial future. Shirley had endured endless publicity tours, relentless filming schedules, and personal sacrifices. Yet the payoff had evaporated. In her memoirs, she never explicitly condemned her parents with bitterness, often preferring to highlight how loving her mother could be. But the facts spoke for themselves. Her childhood had been monetized, and she was left with only a fraction of what she rightfully earned. This wasn't an isolated issue in Golden Age Hollywood. Many child stars encountered similar mismanagement. Laws that would later protect young performers didn't exist then. Children worked adult hours without the adult privileges of controlling their income or personal decisions. For Shirley Temple, America's beloved star, the betrayal felt deeper. She had to watch everything she'd sacrificed for slip through her fingers, leaving her with a painful reality. Not only had her innocence been sold, but her wealth had vanished too. As if financial ruin weren't enough, the rumors that swirled around her fame became downright bizarre. Strange rumors and a violent threat. During her peak, Shirley Temple's popularity was so massive, it sparked outlandish claims. One rumor alleged she wasn't a child at all, but rather a 30-year-old dwarf cleverly disguised with babyface makeup. The rumor gained such traction in Europe that the Vatican actually sent someone to investigate. People found it suspicious that she didn't lose her baby teeth on camera. In truth, she was just wearing temporary caps to hide the gaps, as most child stars did to maintain a perfect smile. But the rumors didn't end there. A more disturbing incident involved a troubled listener who believed Shirley had captured her daughter's spirit. During a live Christmas radio broadcast, this person planned to confront or even harm Shirley in hopes of freeing that spirit. While the worst-case scenario was narrowly avoided, it underscored the volatile obsession some individuals had with the child star. The combination of intense fandom, bizarre conspiracy theories, and easy access to celebrities in those days created a risky environment. Security measures were practically non-existent compared to modern standards. For Shirley, it must have been bewildering. She was only a young girl, thrust into a whirlwind of celebrity and mania. Paparazzi hounded her. Fans grabbed at her hair to see if her curls were real, and no corner of her life stayed private for long. She had admirers and detractors in equal measure, each inventing outlandish stories to explain how one little girl could dazzle an entire nation. Yet as Shirley inched closer to her teen years, Hollywood's affection for her began to wane, leading to an entirely new set of challenges.
Had absolutely no control over scripts or co-stars or production values.
Time in the spotlight can be ruthless. As Shirley Temple entered her teens, the public no longer saw the cherubic toddler they had adored. They saw a gangly adolescent who didn't fit neatly into the child star mold. Movie studios had banked on her childlike charm, and when that faded, they weren't sure what to do with her. Scripts dried up, and the roles she did land were poorly received. Audiences who once rushed to see her every move now seemed uninterested. Several attempts were made to reboot Shirley's image. Films like Kathleen or other teenage comedies failed to draw crowds. MGM, one of Hollywood's most influential studios at the time, tried pairing her with other teenage sensations like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, but that too fizzled. Behind the scenes, there were allegations that key Hollywood power players expected sexual favors from up-and-coming actresses in exchange for roles. Shirley, brought up with a sense of moral decency, despite the oddities of her childhood, refused to cave to these propositions. Writers and directors occasionally mocked her attempts at maturity, insisting she'd never escape the curly-haired persona. The press, which once doted on her, turned snarky. Articles labeled her as washed up or too plump to be a conventional Hollywood ingenue. Suddenly, the little girl who once saved movie studios from bankruptcy during the Great Depression was being ridiculed for her changing appearance. But Shirley Temple was no ordinary actress, and her next act would shock everyone who thought they had her figured out. By her early 20s, Shirley Temple decided she'd had enough of Hollywood's games. She officially retired from film at 22, but that didn't mean she retired from public life. Instead, she channeled her charisma and well-known face into politics and public service. Marrying Charles Alden Black, a naval officer and businessman, gave her stability she'd never really had before. She adopted the name Shirley Temple Black and soon found herself immersed in a new sphere. One of her most noteworthy achievements came when she was appointed as a U.S. delegate to the United Nations by President Richard Nixon. Later, she served as ambassador to Ghana and then to Czechoslovakia under President George H.W. Bush. Diplomacy suited Shirley well. Her gentle manners and excellent communication skills opened doors that might have been slammed shut for someone else. She also used her platform to advocate for women's issues and to show solidarity with communities of color, an extension of her earlier support for African American performers she'd worked with as a child. People who only knew Shirley Temple from her cinematic days often did a double take seeing her negotiating trade deals or representing American interests abroad. Yet she took it all in stride, describing her life in foreign service as fulfilling and meaningful. It was a long way from those childhood roles as a cheeky toddler in polka dot dresses. This second act proved she was far more than a novelty. She was a woman of depth, intelligence, and resilience. In her personal life, she faced health challenges, but also found the happiness that eluded her in childhood.
Well, the director didn't like the way it looked because they didn't all trip at the same time.
Final reflection and enduring legacy. Shirley Temple lived a full life, passing away in 2014 at age 85. By then, she had become a symbol of resilience, a child star who survived the exploitative system of early Hollywood and still managed to serve her country with distinction. In her public statements, she rarely showed bitterness, even though her formative years had been fraught with questionable film roles. Alleged mistreatment from directors, financial betrayal by her own father, and invasive rumors that plagued her youth. Her legacy invites deeper questions about the ethics of putting young children into show business. Modern Hollywood has stricter regulations, but stories of exploitation and manipulation still crop up. Shirley Temple's experiences serve as a cautionary tale. She was the face of an era when anything went for the sake of a movie's success. Even though she ended up well-respected and admired worldwide, that outcome wasn't guaranteed. So many child actors of her day spiraled into poor mental health or vanished from the public eye entirely. Decades later, Shirley Temple's sweet face and bright eyes still evoke nostalgia. But behind that adorable image lies the story of a tiny girl thrust into adult roles before she could comprehend them, forced to endure bizarre punishments, and left with only a sliver of her hard-earned fortune. Yet she refused to let bitterness define her. Instead, she pressed forward, forging a place in politics and philanthropy. Her story remains a testament to the power of determination, even when the odds seem stacked against you. In the end, Shirley Temple's greatest achievement might not be the childlike sparkle she brought to the screen, but the fortitude she demonstrated off-screen, confronting personal betrayals, rejecting unethical demands, and devoting her later years to meaningful public service. And that is perhaps the most inspiring takeaway of all. A reminder that true greatness transcends any single chapter of life, no matter how iconic that chapter may be. Shirley Temple's life stands as one of Hollywood's most jarring contrasts, a beaming childhood icon, dancing her way into millions of hearts, all while endured in situations no toddler should ever encounter. From wearing grown-up costumes at age 3 to having her finances drained by the people closest to her, she saw both the bright glare of the spotlight and the dark reality behind it. Yet she never allowed that darkness to consume her. She navigated a second career in diplomacy that showcased her poise and intelligence, far removed from the forced grins and ringlets of her youth. Perhaps that's why she endures as an American legend, someone who showed how it's possible to break free from a traumatic past and contribute to the world on one's own terms. Her story remains a vital cautionary tale about the perils of child stardom, as well as an uplifting narrative of personal reinvention. And to think it all started with those signature curls, an infectious laugh, and a Hollywood system ready to exploit both. Shirley Temple managed to step away from the chaos, proving that even the biggest stars can find a new path and shine just as brightly on their own terms.